Welcome to today. This is meant to be a Bible study combined with understanding the world in which we live and putting our world together with the Word and allowing God to transform our lives. This is meant to be a quick study, so I'm going to jump right into some thoughts.
I find myself living in a very frustrating world. And if you're like me, you're kind of wondering, man, what is it about our culture? Our nation just seems to be tearing at itself. We have legislative hearings that we hear one side of the story. We have the mass media where we hear another side of the story. But never do we really find a place where the two groups come into one room so that they can talk to each other and find out who's right, who's wrong, where we got to go from here. And it's easy to be frustrated with that, but I'm more interested in me. Quite frankly, I can't take control of the world and I can't make the world work the way I want it to work. I have a hard enough time making me work the way I want me to work. So I'm going to just focus on me and ask myself some questions like, am I paying for the truth? Truth is something you have to pay for, something you have to acquire. Because if you don't acquire it, you stay an idiot. And so, what is the price tag for turning our back on the truth? It's real easy to do. I mean, all you have to do is to prefer what you want over the truth. We call that confirmation bias. In other words, I already have made up my mind what I'm going to believe. I'm just looking for facts to back me up. And confirmation bias starts with what I want and then asks the question, well, what information can I find to prove my point? When actually that's the opposite way it needs to work. Well, what's true? What's really going on here? And what should I really want? And that's a big process. So in preparing, I've thinking about this, have I ever thought about the corrupting nature of sin? When sin gets in my life, it takes me further than I want to go and keeps me longer than I want to stay. So how does it do that? Just thinking through that and trying to gain some wisdom. And how open am I to the truth? And how would I know how open I am to the truth? And why does God spend so much time focusing on the truth? So in thinking this through, I was immediately drawn to a passage in Hebrews 10:26, where it says, for if we go on sinning deliberately after receiving the knowledge of the truth, there no longer remains a sacrifice for sins. Now I know this verse is cut right out of the middle of a passage that really starts in verse 19. And the right question for this text is, why should we continue to stimulate one another to love and good deeds? Because that's where this thought comes in. Why should we stimulate each other to love and good deeds? So we don't go on sinning, and that we can conform to the truth so that we don't stay stuck in our sin. But due to the nature of the quickness of this study, we're just interested in this verse. And a good question is, what happens when we ignore the truth? Is that a question that you can see answered pretty easily here? Because if we ignore the truth, we stay in our sin. There's not a sacrifice for sin. We don't get out of our sin. What happens when we ignore the truth? We stay in our sin. Or this question, what are the consequences of choosing sin over truth? And the consequences of choosing sin over truth is separating ourselves from the truth, separating us from God himself. So in thinking through interpreting this passage of scripture, basically I just take the question, provide an answer to the question, put the two together and come up with a spiritual principle. And here I think is a pretty good one. When I choose sin over truth, I separate myself from God. Pretty distinct, pretty accurate. Or if you wanted to say it more positively, truth is God calling me back to himself. So as I think through that, I need to ask myself a few questions before I move on. Does this reflect the spirit of the text? And I think, yes, it does. And does it answer the question that we raised? Yes. Both the question and the answer come from the text. So now comes the fun part, the application part. Because now I take this spiritual principle and I begin to ask myself some questions based upon this spiritual principle. Because if truth is God calling me back to himself, and when I choose sin over truth, I separate myself from God, if that is true, I need to ask myself the question, do I listen to the voice of truth? How would I know I listen to the voice of truth? Application is going to come up with 1,000 different questions, because every question you ask, there's a follow-up question that can take you down another bunny trail. How do I recognize God's voice? Am I even looking for the truth? Am I asking God to show me the truth? Who helps me think through my thoughts? Now, this is taking it another avenue, because I could spend a long time in just questions number 1 and number 2, just thinking through my general orientation to the world and seeing God in it and him speaking truth to me. But then there's a whole nother aspect of my relationships with other believers that are helping me think through my thoughts. And who helps me discover the truth? Who stimulates me to loving good deeds? Do I talk to God about what I experience? If I am not talking to God and having a conversation with him, am I really even looking for the truth? Probably not. Do I side with my friends or with the truth? So that when I get into a discussion and there's a group of us and my friend voices one opinion, am I quick to side with my friend, or am I more loyal to the truth? Where do my loyalties lie? And when did I last admit that I'm wrong? That right there will tell you if you're really searching for the truth. If it's been a while, you may not be in pursuit of the truth like you think you are. And then lastly, do I have friends who tell me the truth? Okay. Do I have friends that are more committed to the truth than they are to me? Thus, I want to be committed to them out of their commitment to the truth. Now, these are just some principles that we can think through, questions we need to think through, and to be able to ask ourselves. It's worthy to think on these things. Why? Because if we can come up with solid answers and a game plan, we can ask God to change us and to help us do this. And we have the confidence knowing that he will help us do this, because this is directly what he wants us to do from his word. We have sought him. Now we seek his help. Hope this helps, and I hope you enjoy it. God bless, and have a great day.